Hello my lovelies and welcome to another installment of Minmus Base Hotel and Casino, in which we're finally going to tackle the namesake of this series. We're going to build the hotel and casino itself. Yes, we've built the passenger plane that can carry tourists to and from the spaceport, on Kerbin. Then we've built the SSTO that can transport the equivalent of a full orange tank in terms of mass and ample crew capacity as well. And then we built a sort of transportation solution for getting tourists from the SSTO and into the hotel on the surface of Minmus without the need for going on an EVA. For those that don't know, Kerbals who are tourists in this game, they can't go on EVA. So we've come up with solutions for everything, but now we need to actually build the main thing that all of this infrastructure was built for. That is the hotel itself. So that's what we're going to do in this episode. Well, that's what I'm doing on screen now. Wasn't really sure what kind of approach to take. I thought about making it look like a kind of Earth-style casino, terrestrial-based one, and then the juxtaposition of having that on an alien surface would kind of look funny. But then I thought, you know what? Let's go all out. Let's just try and make it as crazy as we can. So I decided to go for this sort of big, solid, sort of monolithic tower. I thought about having a multiple launched based thing and have it docked together, but I really wanted to get creative with the shape of this thing, and there wasn't really much, way of logistically doing it without just having it launched in one great big lump. So this is me building it here. As you can see, huge crew capacity. I'll probably come up with some sort of diagram to denote kind of these windows here, what floor they are, where the restaurants are, where all the rooms are, that sort of thing. And but I think just, the spectacle of it, it's mainly a cosmetic thing, okay? We all know that this is not actually a legitimate business strategy in Kerbal Space Program to build hotels on the surface of Minmus, but, I think it's quite a cool little thing to do if money is no object for your space program. So, the only downside really, I've got those lander cans there at the bottom to serve as the main entrances for the base. Obviously, pretty redundant because tourist Kerbals can't use doors, but I guess astronauts can use them. They don't have great impact tolerance, though, those lander cans, so it's not the best thing to have as the sole supporting structure for this gigantic hotel, but I think, it was fine. So that's pretty much the main structure done now, just topping off these end caps with some structural end pieces just to make it look a little bit cleaner. And then it looks a little bit messy on the inside, so we can close off those to some observation terminals, which I'll get to imminently. But that's pretty much it. You can see we've got the nice observatory at the very top, followed by some sort of rooms, maybe the platinum suites. Then we've got that sort of balcony with the little doors, like a little terrace. Again, not really that useful because tourist Kerbals can't go on EVA, but it's all about the cosmetics, And then we can go ahead and add those observation terminals there. And that's pretty much this thing wrapped up, to be honest. I thought about showing off the construction of the main rocket itself, but it was quite a convoluted process of trial and error, so I decided not to. Here is the finished hotel. As you can see, it is pretty big, pretty large, so we're going to need a rocket that is equally big and equally large. Well, actually, technically, a lot bigger and a lot larger. Here it is here, if we just do a little zoom out, and you can get a good look at this cross shape here. Nice little pan around shot. You can see kind of the graphical glitching spazzing out on those tail fins on the hotel building itself. That happens a few times throughout this video, and I wasn't really sure of a way to mitigate that from happening, but hopefully you can tolerate it. And here we are launching at a beautiful frame rate. This is sped up quite significantly for you guys. It took about 10 minutes real time to get this thing into orbit for me. So be grateful that you have the ability, or be grateful that I have the ability to allow you to watch this at faster speed, because it was pretty tedious flying this thing for me. But yeah, in terms of our ascension, we just went for a fairly conservative gravity turn. Don't know if it's obvious or not, but this thing is not the most aerodynamically shaped thing, so I had to be fairly careful in how we steered it. Luckily I'm using those vector engines, which have enormous gimbal range, and we've got those quite a lot of tail fins on the main booster itself to help us stay under control. But even so, it was a pretty unwieldy craft, particularly now we've ditched those first two boosters there. It became a lot harder to control, but again, because of that vector and the wide base that the engines make, it was alright. We didn't have too many hitches on the flight. So the rest of the flight is pretty just quite slow, just maintaining 45 degrees for quite a while, just so we can ascend. Really. So I'm not sending this with any crew, as you might have noticed. This is because I want to show maybe show one final episode that shows me actually putting everything into place, so getting some tourists, getting them on, the terrestrial aircraft, fly them to the Kerbal Space Center, board them on board the SSTO, and then have the SSTO launch its way along the runway into the air and into space, drop them off on the surface of Minmus, where they can then board the crew transport bus thingy-bob that I built a couple of weeks ago, and then they can embark on the hotel itself, and it can be like a nice little sort of wrap-up episode for everything. But then again, I might actually build some more buildings for this thing, who knows. It is only one tower for now. I didn't want to make it too extravagant. I thought about building like several of these towers, but the problem with Kerbal Space Program, once you have so many parts, it becomes very, very choppy in terms of frame rate, and I didn't want to compromise that too much. I feel like this is a good kind of balance between looks and game performance. And with that, we've pretty much expended all of the fuel in our first stage. Well, not first stage, but main booster stage. So the rest of the missions now, it's going to be it looks kind of funny because it's just the hotel itself propelling itself along. Kind of looks very futuristic in that it doesn't have any obvious fuel tanks. But of course the fuel tanks are all in the center, and this is why, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have any crew on board. The first reason was because I wanted to showcase the crew being transported to the hotel in a separate episode where all the cogs come together. The other reason is the fact that the core of this hotel is fuel tanks. So in the fantasy of this thing, the idea is that we basically drain all of the fuel in the hotel on the way to Minmus, and then those fuel tanks become like converted into elevator shafts and staircases and stuff like that. So all the staircases at the moment are submersed in fuel. So we have to get rid of all that fuel before we can start having Kerbals realistically live on here. So that's kind of the other reason why, and it's how I kind of justify to myself as to why this thing is packed full of fuel, because we've got no intention of ever refueling it once it's landed. It doesn't ever need to move, and yeah, that's just it made the rocket a lot more simple if we had the fuel. If we had fuel reserves inside the hotel itself, it made it easier. We wouldn't have to ditch any kind of auxiliary boosters and stuff. So just there, actually, I tried to make a maneuver node to get ourselves to Minmus, but I had that weird glitch where the maneuver node maker wasn't showing up, so I had to do a quick F5 and a quick F9 just to bring it back. But of course that meant that the predicted burn time didn't work, so we had to kind of see the estimated burn time now says not applicable. So we have to just do a quick puff of burn just before we actually reach our maneuver node to find out exactly how long we need to burn for. But you get a good idea of how long it's going to take based on how long it took for you to do your initial Kerbin circularization. So just adjusting retrograde and prograde here. For Minmus, because of its inclined orbit, you're not really going to get a very good equatorial encounter with it. So just worry about prograde and retrograde for the moment, and then we'll adjust the vertical, so normal and anti-normal, the little pink arrows. We'll adjust those when we're in sort of deeper space, because then it'll be far more efficient. The closer you are to the planet, the more expensive it is to do inclination changes. I know a lot of people, including me, as like a misspeaking, like a verbal typo, will say it's always more efficient to do burns the closer you are to a planet to make use of the Oberth effect. Whilst this is true, it's only true for prograde and retrograde burns. When you're trying to do inclination adjustments, it's far, far cheaper to do it as far away from the planet as possible. Just a little good to know tip in case you didn't know that already, or if you thought that it wasn't, if it was the other way around where it's more efficient to do it near the planet. Just here to tell you it's not. So yep, we have our encounter here, and as I said, it's a non-optimal encounter, so we're going to make a second maneuver node here just to bring our periapsis nice and close to the equatorial level. Obviously we're aiming for a very specific region on Minmus, so we want to get a nice equatorial orbit because A, that passes over the spot we want to land on, and B, it makes it a little bit easier when it comes to predicting our trajectory when we're coming in nice and low and equatorially as well. So we've reached our burn. Obviously we're using quite a few vectors on this stage as well. I did explain this in the last Minmus Base Hotel and Casino episode, because we used a vector engine for our low Kerbin orbit to Minmus surface transfer. We used a vector as well. Vectors have very, very high gimbal. In fact, I even said that earlier in this video, and this craft is not very well balanced or very easy to control, so just having all that gimbal really helps us keep it under control. So yes, I could have made this craft far more efficient. Probably didn't need as many vectors as it has, to be honest, but just for the ease of use, and again, vectors, they're very heavy, and Minmus's gravity is not very strong, so we're having a heavy structure as possible would be beneficial to making sure we keep nice and planted on the surface. There's a nice little good shot of the actual aesthetics of the hotel itself. The only reason I've got those wing pieces at the top is just so we can have the logo visible on the structure itself. I did play around with sort of building like a hotel sign out of sort of airplane pieces and air elevators and stuff, but I couldn't really find a good way to make it look good. It ended up looking a bit naff. every time. Even when I just took like a flat piece and then built it out of round lights, I still couldn't get it to work too well. So in the end, I abandoned that. So here we are. See that flag there? That's what we planted in a previous episode. So we know we're aiming for the right biome. So we can just burn retrograde and slightly towards the normal node in order to get the inclination adjusted, so we can be a bit more in a better place. Basically, I wanted to aim for that sort of nice little narrow crevice, I guess. Not crevice, but you know, trench. It's not even a trench, is it? Whatever. Doesn't matter. The semantics and all of that don't really. It doesn't matter. So we are just doing a very conservative retrograde burn. I want to try and burn up as much fuel as possible. You can see I've only got 150 meters per second remaining. Because again, I didn't really want this thing to be half filled with fuel, because in my head the idea would be that, you know, the fuel tanks can be converted into the elevator shafts and staircases once this thing is drained. So it would make sense if we could have it empty. And there we are, touchdown. The top balcony wobbles a little bit there, but overall stays together pretty well thanks to auto strut. Auto strut's great if you enable it. You can enable it in advanced tweakables if you don't know how to activate it yourself. But there we are, the hotel is touched down, and you can see barely any fuel remaining. So I say we did a pretty good job. We can just transfer all that fuel into like one little auxiliary tank and just say that was always the tank that was meant to be used for when we touched down, didn't have any fuel left. So now we can just disable the gimbal and ultimately shut down those vectors, because having the gimbal active can sometimes, it might make this thing sway a bit as the gimbal tries to move it around, I don't know. So I thought, let's try and switch to the bus and see if we can dock it. And then I realised that I'd aimed for the wrong flag and was actually in the wrong biome. So did have to do a little tactical quick load here. And here we are, touched down in the right location. I didn't think you'd need to see the touchdown again, and the second time I landed I was far rougher because I just wanted to get it done. And ironically, I was much more efficient this time. I had a lot more fuel left over. So I thought, if I'm going to show one of the landings, I may as well show the one where I landed a bit better. So here's the bus coming in hot. Had to do a couple of quick saves, quick loads, as the graphical glitch where everything looks all wavy kept on kicking in. You can see it starting to manifest a bit at the top of the hotel spire there. But we're going to be aiming for that long docking arm, and the reason for that docking arm is because although technically this thing is the right height for that docking port, sometimes for whatever reason the game doesn't want to play ball and doesn't want to join the docking ports together. In the event of this, what you can do is you can switch to the hotel itself, control from the docking port, and you can see I've put those Werner engines there on all of the side to side and up and down axis. So that thing's not auto-strutted or strutted at all, so it has a little bit of flex to it, so you can kind of bend the arm to make it the same height as the actual transport using those engines. But actually, just going back and forth a little bit and nudging it, we managed to get it docked without needing to resort to that. So it's nice to have it as a backup in case you need to go that far, but we didn't need to worry about it this time. And there it is, all docked together. And I guess that pretty much wraps up what we needed to cover in this episode, to be honest. So if you liked what you saw, there is a link on screen to some more things, including my Twitter and Patreon and Discord, all of which are in the description as well. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of your week and your weekend, because it's Saturday, isn't it? Not Wednesday, my dudes.